Hi, I'm Thelma English. Welcome back to British Lit Survey. This is session 31 out of 32. Session 32 is a day for senior projects, games, brunch or a lunch if you desire, and a time to play Brit Lit Jeopardy. There are several versions of the game that your teacher, facilitator, or parent needs to look through and perhaps change the values of the questions. If I have a question that says 500 points and it's too easy, make it a 100 or 200. So you do need to have the person who is running the game look through the game and change it up to fit your class perfectly. There are 3 different versions that I send to teachers, and one is quite hard. It really depends on how you have done the class. Let's open with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the year that we have spent together, the school year. I pray that each student and family that has invested their time to watch these videos and do the assignments and read all of the books will be blessed. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, moving on. This is one of my favorite little memes. The Bible may hurt you with the truth, but it will never comfort you with a lie. And hopefully we are like that with one another also. Our devotion, this is the last time. You have a volunteer reading a devotion from Imitation of Christ. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, we're back. Moving ahead to our schedule review, we're looking at following your heart. We're reviewing in the classroom today. You'll be taking your last quiz before you turn in your exam next week. We'll be talking about other English Romantic poets that we didn't have time to visit and read their things. Some wrote novels, most wrote poems, a couple wrote novels also, and then looking again at the consequences of Darwin, Freud, and Nietzsche. You'll be reviewing for your exam after class today if there's time. Your reading this week is just reviewing for the exam, and so it's an open book take-home exam. Make sure that your questions are thorough. Don't leave a 2-sentence partial answer if you need 10 sentences to write a complete exam, a complete answer. You do have some syllabus reading to clean up, and you'll be turning in your syllabus reading checklist this week, next week, when you have finished reading all your syllabus. That is part of your grade. Usually it's about 10%. And so if you haven't been doing your syllabus reading, it can take you down 1 letter grade, 10% out of 100% for the entirety of the year. Also, let's see, I've got my camera right in my face. Also, any exam questions that you want to ask about, you can ask after class today. Optional online is my 1-hour British Lit overview if you need to use that for your exam. And then senior projects can either be this afternoon after class, or they can be next week before the game. Always do those kind of things before the game. All right, let's go ahead and pause for a quiz on the death of Ivan Ilyich and the day boy and the night girl. Okay, we're back. Hopefully you enjoyed those stories. I know the death of Ivan Ilyich can go by a little bit on the slow side because he is a realist writer, and so he writes with realist details, all of the details. Did you figure out that Ivan Ilyich at the very end got saved? Yes, isn't that beautiful? And then of course, Day Boy and Night Girl. Day Boy and Night Girl, an allegory by George MacDonald. I remember I told you that C.S. Lewis said he never wrote anything in which he was not borrowing or inspired by George MacDonald. There are lots more fairy tales where those came from, the Day Boy and the Night Girl. There are a lot of fairy tales from George MacDonald. Your library may have them. You have to remember that he is 100 years ago now, and so it's hard to say what type of thing your library makes room for. Okay, let's talk about a few poets who we have not met this year. One of them is Christopher Marlowe. He's almost contemporaneous with Shakespeare. They knew one another, they lived at the same time. Shakespeare didn't die until 1616. Christopher Marlowe died quite young. He was a poet, playwright. He translated Ovid and Lucan, so mostly love poetry. He was born in Canterbury, England. Remember our Canterbury Tales? Way down south in Canterbury, England. And he was the son of a shoemaker. He attended the Corpus Christi College at the University of Cambridge on a scholarship because he was a shoemaker's son. And he got a Bachelor of Arts degree, so a BA, in 1584 when he was 20. He continued his studies and received a Master of Arts, so an MA in 1587, and then moved to London, where all the great writers go. He was second only to Shakespeare as an Elizabethan dramatist. He wrote some of the best English language tragedies, including Dr. Faustus and the Jew of Malta. We didn't talk about these very much, but there have been movies and other books written about Faustus, and so I thought I would tell you about that now. Marlowe was best known for his unconventional approach to drama. It included the use of blank verse and the portrayal of flawed and complex characters, and that's always useful in a tragedy because they have to have a flaw. Now, the Jew of Malta inspired Shakespeare to write The Merchant of Venice, and it's interesting that rarely will you see the Jew of Malta appearing on a stage today, but you'll see The Merchant of Venice still over and over and over. And so Shakespeare took that story, rewrote it, and added some other things. And Shakespeare, we're still reading and viewing today. Interesting. Dr. Faustus is a play written by Marlowe telling the story of a German scholar named Faustus who is dissatisfied with his life and the limits of human knowledge. Okay, the dissatisfaction with life is the key there. Because he's going to sell his soul to the devil. In an attempt to gain unlimited power and knowledge, Faustus makes a deal with the devil, selling his soul in exchange for 24 years of service from Mephistopheles, a devilish servant of Lucifer. Over the course of the play, Faustus engages in a series of increasingly immoral and destructive acts, using his newfound power to indulge in worldly pleasures and amass great wealth. So he gets really rich doing bad things. Despite moments of regret and hesitation, he ultimately refuses to repent, and he's drug off the stage, off to hell at the end of the play. It kind of makes you think of the play Everyman that we read, doesn't it? Where he's drug off to hell drug off at the end. This play is known for its powerful language, vivid imagery, and exploration of complex themes like the nature of sin and redemption, the limits of human knowledge. We cannot know everything, and the dangers of unchecked ambition. So he had some lessons he was trying to teach there. The play is also notable for its depiction of a tragic hero who is both sympathetic and deeply flawed, reflecting Marlowe's interest in complex and morally ambiguous characters. The tragic hero has a tragic flaw. And the tragic flaw, some people teach it that the tragic flaw is something they can't help. It's a flaw in their character and that causes their downfall. But that's not really true. There's something in their character that they allow loose that enable them to make a very, very, very bad decision. He's responsible for the choice, but the choice once made is going to destroy him. Just like in Macbeth, portrayed here in a photo of a play, a stage rendition, where he has committed the murder and now he's going to start going crazy and there will not be enough water, as he says, in the entire ocean to wash his hands clean. And so it's the same kind of thing that Dr. Faustus has accomplished what he thought he wanted, but he had to use the devil to accomplish that. And he made really, really bad choices, as we would say today. Marlowe's life was cut short when he was killed in a meeting house in 1593, so he was only 29 years old. No one knows what he could have lived to have done. His death remains shrouded in mystery, and there are a lot of theories about who was responsible and why he was targeted. He does seem to have been targeted. Some sources might say that he was in a tavern or something like that, but it's not really. It's a whole row of houses that were turned into little businesses. And this one you could go in and get a drink, but it was a little upper class establishment. And it does appear he was targeted. He was involved in some political things he probably shouldn't have been involved in, and he may have been taken out. Near this spot lie the mortal remains of Christopher Marlowe, who met his untimely death in Deptford on May 30th, 1593. And then there's a quote from Dr. Faustus. "Cut is the branch that might have grown full straight." So accidentally, a branch that could have gone straight, and straight is always a metaphor for following what you're supposed to do, following the law, following God's word. Cut is the branch that might have grown full strength. And so his branch was cut too soon, but it's a quote from Dr. Faustus, which is kind of cool. This is a poem, one of my favorite poems by Christopher Marlowe, and it's called The Passionate Shepherd to His Love. And it's my favorite because a realist author, Sir Walter Raleigh, wrote a response to this romantic poem. So it's not my favorite because it's romantic. It is my favorite because it has a reply that is awesome. Camera is falling down. Let's see. Falling down more. Apologies. Come live with me and be my love, and we will all the pleasures prove that valleys, groves, hills, and fields, woods or steepy mountain yields, and we will sit upon the rocks, seeing the shepherds feed their flocks by shallow rivers to whose falls melodious birds sing madrigals. And I will make thee beds of roses and 1,000 fragrant posies, a cap of flowers and a kirtle embroidered all with leaves of myrtle. A gown made of the finest wool, which from our pretty lambs we pull, fair-lined slippers for the cold, with buckles of the purest gold, a belt of straw and ivy buds, with coral clasps and amber studs. And if these pleasures may thee move, come live with me and be my love. The shepherds' swains shall dance and sing for thy delight each May morning. If these delights thy mind may move, then live with me and be my love. It's a beautiful, beautiful poem about a shepherd, no doubt young, who is trying to convince his lady love to come live with him and to be his love. Sorry about the camera. I may pause the audio here to fix my camera. Okay, it's a beautiful poem, isn't it? But the shepherd's asking her to run away, come live with me and be my love. He doesn't say anything about getting married. And Sir Walter Raleigh, a more realistic poetry writer, wrote a reply, The Nymph's Reply to the Shepherd by Sir Walter Raleigh. And I love this. If all the world and love were young, and truth in every shepherd's tongue, those pretty pleasures might me move to live with thee and be thy love. Time drives the flocks from field to fold, when rivers rage and rocks grow cold, and Philomel becometh dumb, the rest complains of cares to come. The flowers do fade, and wanton fields to wayward winter reckoning yields. A honey tongue, a heart of gall, is fancy's spring, but sorrows fall. Thy gowns, thy shoes, thy beds of roses, thy cap, thy kirtle, and thy posies, soon break, soon wither, soon forgotten, in folly ripe, in reason rotten. Thy belt of straw and ivy buds, the coral clasps and amber studs, all these in me no means can move, to come to thee and be thy love. But could youth last, and love still breed, had joys no date, nor age no need, then these delights my mind might move, to live with thee and be thy love. And so you see, a realist writer, Sir Walter Raleigh, is answering this romantic writer, which is just amazing. Our romantic writer, Christopher Raleigh, Sir Walter Raleigh, Christopher Marlowe, and Sir Walter Raleigh. Please excuse me for fumbling around. That's what I get for putting them back to back. Sir Walter Raleigh was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth, and he soon became one of her favorites. There were rumors about them, and a lot of his poetry was written to flatter Elizabeth. As a sailor and a war hero, he even interrupted his education to go fight the Huguenots in France. So obviously he's against the Protestants in France. We read the letter of consolation last week. Well, Sir Walter Raleigh was off fighting against them. It was his plan to settle an English, it should be Anne instead of an English colony on Roanoke Island in North America. You have heard about Roanoke Island in your American history studies. He was one of Elizabeth's favorites, wrote a lot of poetry about her. When Elizabeth discovered he had secretly married, both he and his true love were placed in the Tower of London, but in separate cells. And he was there, I think, 9 months. He was in the Tower of London, and I don't know what happened to his true love, but she was bad. Edmund Spenser, another poet we didn't have time for. Edmund Spenser, the Faerie Queene, is usually not studied unless you're going after a master's in English literature, or you just love English literature and you want to read it on your own. It's quite long. It's over 9,000 lines long. It's one of the longest English poems in the English language. It was published in 6 books in 1590, and it's called The Faerie Queene. I have retained the original spelling. It tells the story of a knight, more than one knight, representing various virtues. So these knights represent holiness, temperance, friendship, chastity, justice, courtesy, pretty much the same virtues that we saw in the Green Knight. On the back of his, on the back of his shield, on the back of the shield were these virtues and a picture of the Virgin Mary, I think. But these were the virtues of a knight. And he goes on this quest to serve the Faerie Queene. Now, the Faerie Queene is just symbolically Queen Elizabeth I. And these different knights, these are different aspects of her reign, but it's all told allegorically. It was wildly popular at the time it was written, extremely popular. Spenser was a friend of Sir Raleigh's, and Sir Walter Raleigh is the one who got the Queen to take a look at this poem and then gained him his fame. He uses allegory, symbolism, classical mythology, Christian theology, and medieval romance to weave his story. And that's where one kind of literature leads to the next. Classical literature, we just keep coming back to that you need to learn classical literature to understand all of the classical allusions in all of the literature. The characters and events in the poem are often symbolic of abstract concepts, those virtues and then vices that the knight encounters on his quest. Spenser created his own meter for the poem, and so it's called a Spenserian stanza. And the stanza has 9 lines. The first 8 lines are in iambic pentameter, just like Shakespeare. And then the final line is in iambic hexameter. And this is the way that he wrote. This unique form gives the poem this distinct rhythm and kind of a musical musicality is the best word I could think of. The poem was widely popular. It explores the human condition and human nature. Will they choose well? Will they choose evil? What will they choose? Those influenced by Spenser's poem, The Faerie Queene, include John Milton, C.S. Lewis, William Wordsworth, and even T.S. Eliot. So he was extremely influential. Book 5 out of the 6 that were published, it was never finished. The poem was never finished. Book 5 is the book primarily concerned with justice, and justice is personified by the knight Artegall. And he encounters injustice and a corrupt judge, and he comes into this situation where men are captured by women, kind of this Amazon kind of women. It's a crazy but very popular poem. Artegall, they call him the Golden Knight because of the justice. He never gets to finish his story because Spenser never finished the poem. But I did pull out one stanza from book 5 to share with you, and I've retained the original spelling. And now listen to the meter. Such is the cruelty of womankind, when they have shaken off the shamefast band, with which wise nature did them strongly bind, to obey the hests of man's well-ruling hand, that then all rule and reason they withstand, to purchase a licentious liberty. But virtuous women wisely understand that they were born to base humility, unless the heavens them lift to lawful sovereignty. And so I wasn't going to read line 9 until I explained it a little bit. The first 8 lines are pretty much iambic pentameter. And the idea of this is, such is the cruelty of womankind when they've shaken off that shamefast band, which nature did strongly bind them with, to obey the behests, the requests of man's well-ruling hand, that then all rule and reason they could withstand. It's like women aren't reasonable. A little bit of a slam on women, but you have to remember this is 400 years old. To purchase a licentious liberty. And the woman was a licentious woman. She basically was a man in woman's skin. She made the men, if you can believe it, a poem from 400 years ago, she made the men that she captured, she made them wear women's clothes and do housework and things like that. But virtuous women wisely understand that they were born to base humility, unless then, because he's writing this about Elizabeth, and Elizabeth is ruling as a queen, and she's a woman. You know, they've had all kings, and she's ruling as a woman. And she didn't marry. She didn't want to be a queen. She wanted to be a queen in charge. She did not want to be somebody's wife. Many people think there's a reason. That's why she didn't marry. And she may have, been worried about dying in childbirth, and she liked ruling. And so she just let people come and court her, but she never married. And so he wisely adds, as this last line of the stanza, unless the heavens lift them up to lawful sovereignty. And there's how you save your head from being chopped off. How to be a romantic poet. This is funny. It's a little bit of comedy. This is probably, I found this on the internet years and years and years ago, and thank goodness I retained the author's name if this is his real name. I decided at the time it probably was some graduate student who had had just about enough of the romantic poets, and so he's going to make fun of them by teaching you how to become a romantic poet. And it is quite interesting. Oh, reader, does a drowsy numbness pain your sense? Does the sight of a ruined abbey send you into raptures? Do you often brood, swoon, mourn, melt, or ache? If so, you may be ready to take your place among the immortal poets of the Romantic era. Just follow these simple instructions, and before you know it, you'll be a permanent fixture in Mrs. English's syllabus, English 101. Mien and demeanor. First, you've got to look the part. One thing nearly all the Romantics had in common was hair. and lots of it, masses of glossy curls, preferably raven-hued. Wear an open-necked shirt in all weather. This will both expose your shapely throat to general view and help you to catch a wasting ailment. If you have a tendency toward fat, emulate Lord Byron. When he had found himself exceeding the limits of poetic girth, he played cricket, wearing 7 waistcoats and a greatcoat until he was once again suitably ethereal. Get an early start. As a teenager, Shelley was already sleeping with a pistol and poison under his pillow and writing poems about nuns with half-eaten eyeballs. Suicide must always be an option, foremost in your mind. I should many a good day have blown my brains out, reflected Byron, but for the recollection that it would have given pleasure to my mother-in-law, which is quite funny. Suicide's not funny. If you are somebody in these poems, if you also have an attraction to morbid things and suicidal thoughts, please, please, please tell an adult and get some help. Suicide is not funny. We're making fun of it because of these poets, but it's certainly not anything funny. So he would have he would have done it, except he didn't want to give pleasure to his mother-in-law. She would have been happy if he was dead. Dissipation and love. Your youthful exploits can fall into one of 2 categories, athletics and expulsions. Either swim or walk a notable distance like Byron and Keats, or get yourself kicked out of school for a scurrilous publication. Later, start ingesting large quantities of controlled substances. Coleridge chose opium, which gave him recurring nightmares about grade school, among other topics. Byron preferred to quaff wine from the skull of a medieval monk. Oh, that's romantic. In matters of the heart, you must be either a conspicuous failure or a conspicuous success. Keats was too short to find love, barely 5 feet tall, which induced professionally useful melancholy. Byron's amours, on the other hand, ran the gamut from his Calvinist Bible teacher to an Italian countess to a Cambridge choir member to his own half-sister. He left a trail of broken hearts and illegitimate children in his wake, which scandalized England and boosted his sales. But remember, as far as your poems are concerned, you have only one love, and her name is fill in the blank, as in ode to fill in the blank, etc. Think of Wordsworth's Lucy poems. You choose one name, and that will be her name for your poems. You and your muse. Before sitting down to write, get in the proper mood. When Byron composed one poem, he said he was half mad between metaphysics, mountains, lakes, love inextinguishable, thoughts unutterable, and the nightmare of my own delinquencies. That's the right frame of mind. Also helpful for inspiration are thunderstorms, ruins, and wars of national independence. Imitate the masters. The best line in all romantic poetry, the one that encapsulates every rule of the genre, is Shelley's "Swiftly walk o'er the western waves, spirit of the night." He socks you right in the gut with an unexpected initial adverb, swiftly, then wins added points for the use of the word "or," reference to the West, maritime, synecdoche, direct address of a spirit, and gratuitous capitalization. In just 9 words, Percy earns a perfect score. Expiration. What does a romantic poet have in common with a credit card? He does not die, he expires. This involves not merely ceasing to breathe, but rather ceasing to breathe amid suitable theatrics. One popular route is a wasting illness like Keats' consumption, which will give you plenty of time to travel to Italy, compose your own epitaph, savor the guilt of women who've spurned you, and watch your cheek grow wan, etc. For a quicker departure, drown yourself in the Gulf of Spezia like Shelley, or perish for the cause of Greek liberty like Byron. Thomas Love Peacock distinguished himself by dying after a house fire when he stood among his beloved books shouting, "By the immortal gods, I will not move." That was a grand exit. Warning: model yourself on Keats, Byron, Coleridge, but never Wordsworth. Wordsworth made a promising start of things, but before long, he'd moved in with his sister, gone bald, become a Tory, found a false religion, acquired a Scottish terrier, and began writing sonnets in praise of capital punishment. He died full of honors at a ripe old age of a common cold. Oh, sorry fate. Okay, what do you think? Do you like that? Was that kind of fun? Your teacher or parent has that as a document in case you want a copy. If your class is rather large, you might even skip this section and have one of your TAs, your teacher assistants, have them wear a voluminous white shirt with the throat open, and especially a girl with curly hair who can pretend to be a boy, and have them recite how to be a romantic poet with some drama. I've had classes that could do it and classes that couldn't do it, but that is fun. All right, this is where we're at in 2023. We are now in an era that we call post-Christianity. At first, it was just Romanticism. This is also Romanticism. It's still following your heart, but it's kind of an insane following your heart. It's following absolutely anything except Christianity. And this is post-Christianity. And we now live in post-Christian America. Just over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, this could be called post-Christian America. When we had a president, that was President Obama, who told the Egyptians, and I don't remember the year, who said, America is not a Christian country. And then he went on to say, we are we started out, but we welcome all faiths, and we have all faiths not admired the same, but we lift up all faiths the same. And a friend of mine, an online friend, I would never encourage you to find online friends, but way back when the internet was not the internet, but when you could join a listserv, I joined what was called, you'll have to ask some older adult, I joined what was called a listserv. And these were teachers talking about their lessons and talking about literature. Teachers talking about history and literature. And I joined this listserv to learn about classical lit, to learn about English lit, and I could cautiously pose questions every now and then. And Dr. Jan Haluska, who was the chair of English at Southern Adventist University, was kind enough to answer some of my questions. And then we began a personal correspondence rather than a listserv, and he was quite interested in home education and what was homeschooling like, and he helped me. I would say, well, should we read this or that? And he'd say, well, why do you want to read that? He rarely answered a question directly. He made me think and research. And back then, research was buying books and going to the library. And so research was not just going on the internet, and we certainly didn't have Chat GPT. When we were talking about post-Christianity, and of course, this has been quite a long time ago when we were talking about post-modernity and talking about romanticism and the things that make literature romanticism. And he is the one who gave me the list of extreme political correctness. Actually, I added that one. Permissiveness, extremes, intolerance, overemphasis on ethnicity. We see that today. We're actually dividing people up by ethnicity now, or by color, skin of your color, the color of your skin. Fabricated history and the denigration of reason. These are all things that are an avoidance of truth. And one thing that Dr. Haluska told me, this might have been 1999, and he says, all of these are symptoms of the foundational theory. G.K. Chesterton calls Romanticism Christian principles gone mad. Postmodern thought is Romanticism, which has destroyed itself. And of course, now we're at actual post-Christianity. Essentially, Dr. Haluska said, postmodernism, or post-Christianity now, stands firmly on existentialism, The doctrine that all doctrines are fictional attempts to link the bare facts of existence, which themselves have no natural linkage at all. So every general pattern, whether it's Christianity, Buddhism, modernism, romanticism, naturalism, Platonism, communism, et cetera, is just a plastic overlay pattern superimposed artificially. Or in other words, a pair of glasses that you put on every day, and these are the things through which you view the world. So for example, if you are a Christian, you put these on every day, allegorically. You wake up with them on your eyes and you perceive the world as a Christian would perceive the world. But if you're a Buddhist or something else, you perceive the world differently. And so every general pattern is simply a plastic overlay superimposed artificially. Each of us defines the pattern of reality for ourselves in our own heads, and there's no necessary connection between us. A pattern of reality. And the idea is this pattern of reality, is it based on truth or not? Now, we as Christians have this unique position that our pattern of reality is based on actual truth that is found in the Bible. We have all of this truth, that a giant collection of truth that we will spend our entire lives reading and studying, and hopefully we will change and we will understand the Bible more and more. But that is our pattern of reality. We accept the Bible as truth, and that is our reality. But if you've never heard about the Bible, you have a different pattern of reality, whatever you've been brought up with. This is a William Blake, one of our 6 romantic poets. Nothing is real beyond imaginative patterns men make of reality. And so here's someone, he was kind of a Christian, I think, but he understood that we make patterns of our reality. He said nothing was real. But of course, the Christian worldview, we're going to say, is real. For 1700 years, the defining pattern was a theological pattern, and it was Christianity from the time of Jesus until AD 1700. Then it became a mechanical pattern, of objective pattern in the 18th century, then emotional and subjective for the Romantics, and then social for the Victorians. And now for us, it's just fictions. We see this denigration of reason. People will not follow reason. There is no common sense. We are fabricating history to make it fit what we like. We take down the statues that don't match the history that we like. And we have this overemphasis on ethnicity, on where you're from, rather than focusing on where you are right now as a person. And we see these extremes in tolerance. The idea that every worldview has the same value, which is impossible, because some worldviews are based, for example, the Muslim worldview is based on the idea that Allah, Muhammad is Allah's prophet, and that is the only truth there is. And if you don't believe that truth, not only is it wrong, but if that truth is presented to you and you don't accept it, then in the old days, they would kill you off. And nowadays, we have a hard time understanding why, for example, Muslims in America, why a Muslim father would kill his daughters or kill his wife. But that's a Muslim reality, that the entire family has been ashamed and has been dishonored publicly. And the only way to regain that family's honor is to make those women submit again. And if you cannot do that, you must kill them. And that way your family can get their honor back. It's just the way it is. In our post-Christian worldview, we see this permissiveness that allows basically anything that you're interested in. And so religions like Christianity and Islam don't allow that type of variation. You must fall into conformity with Christianity and with Islam. With Christianity, it is to a spiritual death. With Islam, it's very often a physical death. And so now the base worldview, the base building block of worldview, if you're looking for extra credit and draw that on the back of your exam, the base worldview is fiction. It's pretend, it's feeling, it's whatever you want to do. We ourselves are separated from what we were a moment ago, right? We're not the same person as we were 5 seconds ago, and what we will be in 5 seconds from now. That's really alone. And see Duchamp's Nude Descending a Staircase for a pictorial representation of that doctrine. And this is kind of interesting. I should have warned you that I'd show you a picture of a nude woman. This is from 912, and this is Nude Descending a Staircase. And you can tell that she's not in the same place for very long at all. She keeps moving from place to place. And if you are a Star Wars fan, what about C-3PO descending a staircase? It works quite well in honor of Star Wars fans. I'm sure there's some of you out there. So in this post-truth world, truth died because it was shown to be simply a collection of fictions. Anybody could build his own, and everybody does. Everybody decides what they want to believe and what they're going to call truth. And truth died. We can't even use the word because no one understands what truth means. And we've lost. It's been the death of truth, and we have lost common sense, all those type things, reality that are based on truth. Now I've got some quotes from Dennis McCallum, his book, The Death of Truth, which is excellent. And this is before, this is written several years ago, before many of the things happened that have happened. And he says, in postmodern public education, teachers are no longer transmitters of information to children. Instead, teachers facilitate children as the children construct their own knowledge from a predetermined narrow worldview of extreme tolerance and censorship of other worldviews. And that would be censorship of traditional worldviews, which would be Christianity. And so teachers are there now to facilitate them to not have a narrow worldview, to not follow the narrow way, but to accept all truths, all worldviews. And that's why now the thing in 2023 is taking kindergartners to see drag queen shows. The idea that drag queens are not bad. We called same-sex marriage wrong, and now we have same-sex marriage. We've called drag queens wrong, and so now we're going to prove to all these little children that it's not wrong. These things are just different. And if there is no truth, then I suppose they are just different if there is no truth. But it comes down to what are you going to do about Jesus, doesn't it? The new tolerance in religion means never questioning the propositions of another religious point of view. But wait, there's one exception. It is okay to censure any religion arrogant enough to think it knows the truth. But and even this is not exactly true now, because in America, it is okay to call Christians names, but you can't do that to Islam. And I don't know if it's because it's thought that Islam is still a minority view and they deserve minority status so that they can practice what they believe, or if it's an actual fear of Islam. There is certainly that. There is a fear of Islam. There are all types of things in Islam that you should be afraid of. These are the fundamentalists. They have to be stopped. And they're talking about Christians. They're not talking about Islam. They're talking about Christians. They have to be stopped before they gain the upper hand and begin persecuting other religions again. The marginalized religions, those of non-Western civilizations, must be given a voice, and that would be things like Islam. We don't look for what happened in history anymore. There will never be known. You can't ever know exactly what happened. And besides, everybody's reality was different then as now. No wonder today we have women's history, gay and lesbian history, Black history, and Native American history. And all of these things are in colleges. You can get college credit for all of these things. It's no exaggeration to say that in postmodern or post-Christian cultural history, each marginalized group had their own experience, their own reality. The goal of history is to give voice to the silenced or marginalized minorities. So minority groups are finally getting their own history, but we're losing all of the other history. We used to be naive enough to think that literature was a mode of communication. An author took a pen in hand to produce a text which could communicate propositions to a reader. And now even literature is judged differently. Now, postmodern literary theory has shifted focus of meaning from the author to the reader. Okay, so now it's up to you, the reader, who produces or constructs new meanings from the text, like someone looking at a painting. So you look at a painting and you all get something different out of it. And that's what we're doing with literature. You look at it and we each get something different out of it. Now, when you start applying that to the Bible, it starts getting tricky. And of course, that is exactly what is being done. Moving on to social Darwinism and the influence of Darwin, Freud, Nietzsche, and then Karl Marx. And this would be finishing up your structured notes today. Darwin, Origin of the Species, you must know his relative lifespan to put him in the right century anyway, and that the Origin of Species is 1859. It's the same year Oregon became a state. I don't know about your state. The formulation of Darwin's thoughts on evolution are placed in this book, Origin of Species, and he claimed that it gave scientific support to the theory of man as a higher animal form. And we mean literal man. He kind of meant mankind, but he also meant men in general, being a higher life form than women in general. I like to point that out to girls. If there was any human before Adam, think about it. Theologically, if there was any human before Adam, then there was sin, suffering, and death before Adam, right? Without the fall of man, without Adam sinning, there is no original sin. And without original sin, this fall from grace, there's no need for a savior. Remember, the Bible's all about Jesus coming back to take care of that original sin. And still, there's no need for a savior. There's no need for redemption. Christ died for nothing. So theologically, Darwin's theory and evolution, theologically, it is fatal for Christian theology. Theology suffered horribly after Darwin, and theologians split. Conservative theology is the remnant. So conservative theology doesn't mean conservative in politics. It means conservative in that they believe what the Bible says. If you believe in conservative theology, you believe there was only one man named Isaiah. You believe that Job was a real person. You believe that Jonah was indeed swallowed by a whale and spit up, that it is not an allegory, that Jonah was a real person. You believe all of these things. If you have a conservative theological view, you simply accept what the Bible says. So conservative theology is the remnant from this movement. The modernist theology embraced science that seemed to otherwise threaten extinction to traditional theology. The descent of the modernist instead of the descent of man. And again, you have this cartoon in your syllabus, and you can see that that's Freud right up front, Sigmund Freud. So you have Christianity. If the Bible is not infallible, if there's anything in the Bible that's not actually true, then you can't say we're made in God's image, because that would be foundational. And if we're not made in God's image, if the word is not infallible, there certainly were no miracles. And if there weren't any miracles, there was no virgin birth, which means there's no deity. God didn't come. He did not lay off his divinity and to be born as a man, which means there's no atonement. There's no God, man, Jesus, who atones for our sins, taking our place, which means that he was just a guy, a lunatic or a liar. Jesus was, and there's certainly no resurrection, which leads people to agnosticism. They really don't know what they believe, and that pretty much leads to atheism. They just don't believe in God. They only believe what they can see and touch. with their hands. And that gets kind of tricky. You know, every time you get in a car, you trust that car. Every time you get in an airplane, you trust that airplane. You don't learn all about airplanes and go through the entire plane yourself, making sure that it's all okay. You have a certain amount of trust. And so it gets pretty bad pretty quick. We also see supremacy of the Caucasian male, not female, Caucasian male. And of course, this led to racism and genocide, communism, abortion, homosexuality, female inferiority, and promiscuity are resultant. I think it's interesting that in this image of different facial conformities, which now we know that some of these earlier faces aren't people, they're absolutely apes. And some of the other ones are from inbreeding or from rickets, and things like lack of vitamin C, where your bones change because of all that. And interesting that the first Homo sapien, the earliest Homo sapien they have in this lower right image, is also dark skinned, which is basically saying that dark skin came first and that white people are more developed coming later on, which of course is really a slam, especially, as I always say, if you have any minorities in your family, this is really denigrating. This is really insulting. If you have any minorities, whether they're dark skinned or Asian or, you know, brown or caramel or whatever they are, this is really devastating to just think that this is accepted and that we believe that somehow this is scientific. How does this lead to racism? Well, of course it does. Just as if you took American Lit last year, as we saw in Uncle Tom's Cabin, where people allowed themselves slavery with Black slaves and told themselves, well, they're still kind of animals. They need to be rounded up and treated more like cattle. And so racism. What about genocide? Oh, there have been so many episodes of people trying to get rid of entire cultural groups of people, not always based on skin type, but sometimes based on a culture, trying to just wipe out a people. Think how many times, I don't know, what is it, 20 times through human history that people have tried to wipe the Jews, not from a local location, but from the face of the earth. And abortion. When Planned Parenthood was started, all of the abortion clinics were put in poor Black neighborhoods to try to get rid of more Black children and poor children. And of course, they had this misunderstanding. They were misled to think that things like criminality could be inherited, that if your father was a criminal, you were going to be a criminal. And of course, these things are not inherited. They can be taught. Certainly, if that's in your family, your dad teaches you how to steal, but it's not like you inherit that. And the idea of homosexuality, that we're just animals. And so this barnyard morality type of thing where you just do whatever feels good to you. And the idea of aborting, that this is just an animal. The infant is an animal. And the idea of female inferiority. We females don't really like that idea, that Darwin said females had a smaller brain and that we would never be famous mathematicians and scientists and things like that. And then even promiscuity. You know, how does that bring about promiscuity? How does a belief in evolution bring about male promiscuity? Well, think about it. There's a difference. There's behavioral differences in males, that aggression, that testosterone in males. So if you chalk that up to evolution, then you kind of believe, well, males will be disloyal to their females. It's just part of evolution. They've got that testosterone then, and they have something in them that makes them always go for the best female. So males, you know, this aberrant or animalistic behaviors are justified that way. That, well, men are just like that. It's leftover evolutionary stuff that they go for the pretty woman, even if they have one at home. Once she starts getting old, or they're just exposed to a prettier female, they want that one. And so if once you remove theology and remove the Bible from this, you just end up with barnyard morality, where everybody does whatever they feel like doing. And the idea that females have smaller brains. So children, women, and the senile white have the intellect of an adult Negro, Darwin said. And that was even printed in science textbooks 100 years ago, inviting slavery. and abuse of anybody with a different color skin or a different shape eyes or different kinds of hair. Sigmund Freud, let's put some blame on Sigmund Freud, trying to look so intellectual there with his cigar and his serious face. You don't ever see him bouncing a baby on his knee with a smile. His psychoanalytical theories were embraced by the elite in the 1920s, and this has caused all types of grief. Freud interpreted Darwin into human behaviors, and this implies that the world is godless, and it contributed to the breakdown of traditional values. If you inhibit people from doing what they feel like doing, they're going to become neurotic. You have to let them do what they want to do. One of the lasting influences was that diagram you've seen before of the human personality, where the id is the home of the instincts, the unconscious collection of things that determines what we're going to become. The id constantly demands gratification. And in this respect, it's the primitive, irrational thing inside you. It doesn't know values. It only knows what it wants, and it only knows what it desires. It has no awareness of good and evil. It just wants. When the id is denied, the individual is frustrated, angry, unhappy, and may even become neurotic. And that's how the writers wrote the characters. They became neurotic. Superimposed on the id is that ego, that which the id uses to interact with the outside world. So the ego knows you can't just say whatever you feel like saying. It kind of controls the id. The ego would be what the world sees as the real person. It's like you and me acting really nice when we're together, but we know down inside, well, we know theologically we're filthy sinners, but we don't show that on the outside. We try as much as we can to change and to repress that, to suppress that. But it does that make us neurotic, that we suppress our urges? Above both of these is the superego, something like a conscience, bringing guilt or approval, acting like a judge. It's kind of like the little devil angel and the little red devil and the white angel on your shoulders. One is telling you, go ahead, eat that last cupcake. Go ahead, you deserve it. You made those cupcakes. If he wanted it, he would have eaten it. You can eat it. You don't have to save it for your little brother. That's what the devil on your shoulder is saying. That's what the id says. Just eat the cupcake. And yet the little angel on your shoulder is saying, it doesn't matter that you made the cupcakes. You made those that were just enough for everyone to have two, and you've had your two. You must leave that last one for your little brother because it's his. That type of thing. It acts as a judge. Behind these lie a pair of instincts. It's called the life instinct and the death instinct that are continually in conflict with one another. So the life instinct wants to live. Yeah, it cooperates with people. It does things for survival, like, working hard and having a job or hunting or fishing or whatever. And you want to have children. This is life instinct, to have this family life and to continue. But the death instinct, thanatos in the Greek, not the Marvel superheroes, but thanatos from the Greek word, is the aggression and then the risky behavior. Some people almost have a death wish. You might hear that or see that in a character in a book or in a movie, that they almost seem to have this death wish. They do all these risky things, risky behavior. And these things are reliving trauma sometimes too. Libido is the great reality in Freudian psychology. Libido is the pleasure urge or instinct, the driving force behind all human action, according to Freud. Libido. And sometimes that's called the sexual urge, and I've replaced it with the pleasure urge or instinct. And this is why retailers sell things with scantily clad women, because they are appealing to the libido. If men buy most of the cars, then they are going to sell cars with scantily clad women, having fun with, older men in fancy cars in commercials to make it look like you can satisfy your libido, or even selling laundry soap sometimes with scantily clad women. But generally, this is items that men in particular buy. Those things are sold with beautiful women. So pervasive is this concept. Well, that's why they have scantily clad dancers on football teams. because it's primarily football is aimed at men, or was in the not so distant past. And so that's why you don't have guys out there doing weightlifting and impressing and doing all that. You have scantily clad women dancing. So pervasive is this concept that our dictionaries have adopted Freudian thought to define many human actions. The libido, id, and the ego, those are all Freudian words. And I kind of like this Sigmund Freud, if you can imagine. The price we pay for our advance in civilization is a loss of happiness through the heightening of the sense of guilt. Now you have to remember that Freud is trying to live his life in a theological void. Yeah, remember, he's the one who says he never had the sense of guilt. He's never felt guilty. He doesn't know what that means to feel guilty. And so today we would call that an anti-socialist, which can be quite dangerous, someone who doesn't even have a conscience. Hence, we know of two sources for feelings of guilt, that arising from the dread of authority and a later one from the dread of the superego. So do we worry about disappointing ourselves or disappointing God, this sense of God? The first one compels us to renounce instinctual gratification. The other presses over and above this toward punishment, since the persistence of forbidden wishes cannot be concealed from the superego. And this is in his Civilization and Its Discontents. You can find it on the internet and print it. I suppose it's about 10 typewritten pages. It might be 20. This is a great book, The Question of God. And this is by Dr. Armand Nicolai Jr. And he tells us in his book, The Question of God, that for Freud, what people call happiness is the result of a sudden satisfaction of those sensual needs that have been bottled up. And that's true for many people today who are not Christians, that their definition of happiness is getting everything that they want, whether it's getting lots of women, lots of girlfriends, or getting lots of possessions, or lots of collections, or lots of cars, or big houses, or whatever they want, that being satisfied by that. And that's what people now call happiness. Likewise, a failure to satisfy those needs can lead to unhappiness. For Freud, cultural restrictions that limit an individual's pursuit of sensual pleasure are repression, and they're to be opposed. You don't want to repress your urges. You don't want to do that. In contrast, C.S. Lewis, whose worldview Nicolai compares with Freud's, he compares Freud with C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis spoke of what he called suppression, the conscious effort to control our desires and impulses. So we don't eat the cupcake, we suppress that because we know that's wrong. And then we feel good about it later. We're not repressing everything, we're suppressing that urge. The urge, if you're married, to go talk to some unmarried, beautiful woman and kind of violate the vows of your marriage, to go flirt with a single woman, or slip your wedding ring into your pocket and pretend to be single when you see some handsome man or woman. That's wrong. And Freud would say it's going to make you neurotic. You have to just go enjoy the other woman or the other man. Whereas C.S. Lewis says we suppress that, not because it's necessarily bad, but because something more important is at stake. And that would be, in that instance, the marriage. And something more at stake would be the good standing with your parents and your siblings, to not eat the cupcake. And that's a good thing. So when you suppress and you don't do something bad because you know it's wrong, that's actually a good thing. And this quote is from way back in 2005, almost 20 years old now. Chuck Colson was still alive. This is Chuck Colson handing a Bible, or else using his Bible with a prisoner. And they can't actually have, that looks like a leather Bible. I don't know if he's giving it away or not. You can't give prisoners cardboard Bibles because the cardboard can be used for things. They have to have things like leather Bibles, soft or paper Bibles that you can't make weapons out of. And this is Chuck Colson taking in a whole group into for a prison ministry. But Breakpoint emails come every day, easy to sign up for. They're still printing all these things about Charles Colson, even though he's dead now. They're still carrying on his ministry, his Breakpoint ministry, and his prison ministry. His Breakpoint ministry is an email you sign up for, and you get one every day. And a lot of them are just, I don't really care about that. But about every 10 days, once or twice a month, you'll read something and you think, oh, that's quite profound. And then I would find things for my classes, but very often it's really amazing. It's worth signing up for, and then just delete all the ones you don't want. Remember, the Bible is a dividing line between civilization and chaos. Freud thought that civilized life might just entail too much pain for people. It seemed for Freud that the price we pay for civilization is neuroses. Or as Freud himself would express it, if the development of civilization, I probably should have a cigar here, for this. If the development of civilization has such a far-reaching similarity to the development of the individual, and if it employs the same methods, may we not be justified in reaching the diagnosis that, under the influence of cultural urges, some civilizations or some epochs of civilization, possibly the whole of mankind, have become neurotic? Amazing, isn't it? If man is only an animal, he should not suppress his urges, or he might develop neurotic characteristics. To remain normal, man must not deny himself. Man is motivated by that id, which seeks pleasure. Conscience is religious conditioning, which applies moral restraint, resulting in neurosis, per Freud. Man is an animal enslaved by animalistic urges. And is that truth? And how does this affect writers and their worldview? Writers now create characters based on the assumption that man is motivated and driven by his urge for pleasure. As my friend Dr. Jan Haluska said, Platonic influences in Freud, Socrates' motto was know thyself. This was supposedly written at Delphi. Know thyself, use your reason, think, find answers. Above all, examine your life, for the unexamined life, this is from Socrates, is not worth living. As Christians, we proclaim, know Christ, not know yourself, know Christ, the absolute opposite. Socrates, the Greek philosopher, as quoted, because Socrates never wrote anything down. This is Socrates drinking the hemlock in 399 BC, but that's another class, classical lit. But we do read the Phaedrus, and this is a Platonic dialogue, supposedly quoting Socrates. In every one of us, there are two ruling and directing principles, whose guidance we follow wherever they may lead, the one being an innate desire of pleasure, the other an acquired judgment, which aspires after excellence. But I think the truth is to be found in the Bible. The Apostle Paul, the greatest philosopher of all, here in Romans 7, for I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. Excuse me. Amazing truth here. Easily found, opening up your book, from a man 2,000 years ago who saw the truth. He says, I don't understand my actions. The thing I don't want to do, that's what I do. Tell that to any fat person understands what that means. I don't want to overeat, but I do. And every day I don't want to do it, and then I do. And the thing I don't want to do, that's what I do. And the thing I really want to do, eat just vegetables and fruits and lean meats and things, that's what I don't do. Excuse me. Karl Marx. Marx interpreted Darwin socially and economically, so people to people and then money-wise. Communism and communist economics. And Karl Marx is the one famous for that saying, religion is the opiate, and opiate is from opium, it's a strong drug. Religion is the opiate used by the rich and powerful to enslave and control the poor. So you get people, allow them to be religious because that will enslave and control the poor, because they're not looking for a better life here. They'll always be looking for their pie in the sky religion. Marxism became popular among American writers during the Depression years, and he is popular again now. The idea to take all the money, divide it up equally between everybody, the whole thing of equity. And we don't say equality now in 2023. We say the word equity because equality would presume you take all the money and divide it all up equally among people. Equity says you take all the money and you give the people who have been minorities, you give them more. That's equity. Marxism appealed to unions, but proved disappointing since individuals lose their personal liberty and they lose their property in the effort to achieve the class society. Somebody has to take it all and divide it up again. And so you have the Economic World Forum. Look up, if you don't know who they are, oh my goodness, look up the Economic World Forum. People who believe they should be in charge of the world, telling the rest of the world what they should do. And people are swallowing it hook, line, and sinker. Friedrich Nietzsche. You can't end the year without some cool quotes from Friedrich Nietzsche. He interpreted Darwin philosophically, socially, and religiously. Philosophy is, of course, arbitrary. Your philosophy can be whatever you want it to be, and it reflects little more than the subjective side of the thinker, whatever he thinks is most important, he'll base his philosophy on, while Christianity provides these absolutes and truths, things that are based on eternal truths, which are things that reflect God's character. Christianity, one thing Friedrich Nietzsche said about Christianity is it was the priest class that convinces the herd that the afterlife is the only important thing. Quote from the Antichrist. I have all of these books. I've pulled all of these out of my books. Wherever there are walls, I shall inscribe this eternal accusation against Christianity upon them. I can write in letters which make even the blind see. I call Christianity the one great curse, the one great intrinsic depravity. I call it the one immortal blemish of mankind. The word Christianity is already a misunderstanding. In reality, there has only been one Christian, and he died on the cross. From the Antichrist. And from Thus Spake, I wrote spoke, but I think it's Thus Spake Zarathustra, because he's trying to sound biblical, and like he really thought Thus Spoke Zarathustra. He really thought that that would replace the New Testament. Yes, he had quite an ego, didn't he? Of actual religious difficulties, I have no experience. I have never known what it is to feel sinful. A prick of conscience, of which I have no experience, must be a sort of evil eye. I am too inquisitive, too incredulous, too high-spirited to be satisfied with such a palpably clumsy solution of things. God is really no more than a coarse and rude prohibition of us thinkers. Ye shall not think. Amazing, isn't it? Okay. That's the end. Next week is your last class. It is for senior projects, turning in exams. It is for fun and games, playing British Lit Jeopardy. I hope you have fun. I left See You Next Year in case you take American Lit. It is already up. I don't know if I'll get around to classical lit or not. And so the Lord bless you, and let me know if you thought this was an awesome class or you have positive or negative feedback. You can let me know, and let me know how much you enjoyed. I don't know whether you enjoyed it or not unless you leave me some comments. Thank you. Lord bless you. Bye.